Good evening. It's 7:02, November 16th. I'm Christy Boudreau, and this is the Hatfield School Committee's November business meeting. Thank you all for joining us. As we call to order, first order on our agenda is public comment. And is there anyone in the audience who would like to make a public comment tonight?
I don't see anybody.
Probably not. And I don't see anyone asking to speak on Zoom. So we will move on to our mission moment. And I actually have a mission moment. So this is a new, we're sort of getting familiar with mission moments on our agenda. So just a good reminder about the things of why we do what we do and the difference that our education makes in Hatfield. And so there was something that really struck me this week as we were looking ahead at our agenda. And I think we've all heard the stories about like the one adult in your life outside of your family can really make a difference. And I actually looked it up because I'm like, there's probably research on that. And there is. And so I thought it was really interesting that children and adolescents who have a formal or informal relationship with someone outside their home are less likely to have externalizing behavior problems like bullying and fewer internalizing problems like depression. They're more likely to complete tasks they start, remain calm in the face of challenges, show interest in learning new things, volunteer in the community, engage in physical activities, participate in out-of-school time activities, and be engaged in school. Like scientifically proven what a difference that makes. So it's no surprise that I thought it was really exceptional that our principal has started his own fly fishing group. And so I just thought, that's one more way our school makes a difference. So I thought that was awesome. I'm looking forward to hearing your fishing tales and kudos. So thank you.
I also have something to say for the mission moment, but mine is just little snippets of things over the last couple of months since school began. I was approached by a couple different staff members who have expressed how excited and happy and energized and excited they were for this school year, that everything felt just so positive and they were just looking forward to it more than they had in years. And I just thought that was wonderful, and that came from more than one person. And another comment that I chuckled over was that nothing but kudos to Melissa Petra, and that she must have roller skates on because she is just zipping around the building and is everywhere and is never just found sitting behind her desk for very long. So they just can't imagine how you can be everywhere in the building the way that you are. So those were just some nice little moments that I found out about in the last couple months.
Share. So does anyone else have a mission moment they would like to share tonight?
Yes.
Oh.
Okay. So we have started working with Teresa out of the University of Hartford. I think her last name is Abdi Gentile, but she goes by Dr. T. And, working with this particular consultant has been a change, right? And I had shared with the staff that it wasn't just going to be her going in to watch and observe small group instruction. It was going to be myself and the two reading interventionists. So imagine how, for the most part, you're in your space doing your own thing, and then suddenly there's four adults literally sitting at the same table, watching with their watches out, their cell phones timing you. Just, it's very intimidating and a little overwhelming. And so I had debriefed with some of them, and they were like, this is just very different and difficult, and it was very uncomfortable. And I'm like, I know, I understand. But then I had a teacher come up and said, I was really irritated by some feedback that I was given. But then I'm like, I'm going to go ahead and try it anyway. And now I'm finding it really does make a difference. Thank you. And I'm like, hey. So as uncomfortable as it is to try new things, they're definitely open. And I give them kudos for being open and wanting to better their practice for their students.
Awesome. Okay. I feel like I'm done for the night. On the consent agenda, there's minutes. I guess I do want to just give a shout out that the consent agenda includes a donation from Fly Fishing International, from the fishing game of Hatfield, and from Trout Unlimited. And that all total is close to about $2,000. So that's awesome that that's coming in. Does anything need to come off the consent agenda? Okay, so moved and approved for the minutes from 10:18. We're going to bypass our student representative report for this evening and move on to administrative reports. I do want to call out, I'd like to change things just a little bit on the agenda after Superintendent Wood speaks and Dr. Driscoll. I would like to skip ahead to the school trip to Guatemala and take that out of order. Okay. So with that.
Okay. Well, thank you. Good evening, everybody. We are always working on our instructional leadership. We're working on a grant right now from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. This is actually mostly a planning grant. Originally, I thought it was going to be a curriculum materials grant because that's what it's called. But it's actually more of a planning grant where the grant will pay for time for teachers and administrators to get together and take a look at our curriculum materials and make some decisions about where we should be going and how we should be supporting our current curriculum and the standards frameworks. So we'll be applying for that. The timeline has been pushed out a little bit to November 22nd, so we'll be wrapping that up this week and getting that sent in. But there'll be a small piece for curriculum. The good news is that a couple of pieces of good news out of this. One is the department has done, I think, a really very strong commitment to making sure that we have access to the different programs and materials that are out there that are already research-based, which is as part of ESSA that we sign on as a federal grant. We have to have all of our materials that we use to be research-based. So they have a site called Curate where they go through. They have a team that goes through materials and make sure that they are research-based. They don't endorse any one over another, but they're there. So we'll be looking at that list of materials. Our iReady that we purchased last summer for this year is on that list. And we will be able to purchase materials as part of the grant. We give them an idea of what we're trying to work on. So they are projecting that our grant would be in total of $72,000, which is good. And the money would be coming in as soon as it's approved, but it would primarily be for this work that we need to do to look at our landscape. That is now what it's called. It used to be called assessment and assessing your needs. But now they call it looking at your landscape. So we'll be working on that this spring. We're continuing to work on our security components out of the annual town meeting warrant article that was passed a number of years ago. We're updating up our phones at Smith Academy. Work was done last week over the professional development day that we had. They finished some electrical work and drops for the phones. The phone company that's actually putting in the phones will be starting as soon as they finish up work here at the town office. And we have some equipment that we needed to order as for infrastructure to make the phones work. And that's on back order. So they're kind of trying to schedule both so we don't have pretty phones sitting on our desk that we can't use. So we're trying to do that. We're working on our capital planning, and I'm collecting costs on various things that we hope to put on our capital planning document. Obviously, the roof at the elementary school, we have had some repairs done. We are continuing to work with that company to isolate what the leaks are. It's like, well, I don't know an apt analogy anymore, but essentially, once we repair one area, it's like the water is pushed to go another area because there's really that many holes up there. The entire roof does need to be replaced, so that will be on our plan as well. we'll be talking about whether or not we want to put some rugs or tile replacements at Smith Academy. I think they're original to the building. And so
I think we should auction off some of that.
could
quite
be.
honestly.
They are probably
For
antiques.
fundraising.
And then we did get an engineer's report on some of our HVAC needs, and there is some work that we'll take from that document and put that on our capital plan as well. One being one of the boilers at Hatfield Elementary School, and then pavement work at both schools that needs to be done. That we can do. We did benefit from some work that was done, I think, on School Street, if I know my geography. They were doing some work up there. I think they did some remnants down at Smith Academy, so they tarred half of the entrance. So it's a nice smooth ride when you come in. So that was nice to do. I know that I think Melissa talked about Spooktacular, but I just need to speak to our tournament games as well. Just the genuine outpouring of support from our community, parents and community members at events like Spooktacular and our games, both at the school as well as when they've been off campus as well. So it's really been great to have had such a successful season, to have gone so far as we did with really all three of our teams. We had our Professional Development Day on November 8th. Really a busy day. We had a lot of options for our teachers. There was work inside of each of our schools, as well as we were participants in the Hampshire County, Franklin County Professional Day for the schools. So a lot of our teachers went off campus, and kudos to Mrs. Bremner in terms of being a presenter. Were you at West Hampton High School?
East Hampton,
East Hampton.
the new elementary school. It's beautiful.
Oh, very nice. And she did a presentation for teachers on MTSS. So kudos to her to do that. You want to go on to the personnel report?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything to say, right?
No. There's nothing to say on the personnel report. We haven't had any changes. We had one that's arrived most recently. We do have a long-term sub position that we have posted and we have advertised for, which we will be looking for in a short while for a brief time. And then you have linked now the enrollment update as well.
Any change from last month?
There's no change.
Okay.
No change. I'd like
So-
to say there is, but there is not. I will say we have had a number of visits, at least I know at Smith Academy and both at Hatfield Elementary School as well. So these are in planning for next year, which is great. And we've had the conversation about really sort of starting in January, doing our outreach and maybe having the vote in January by the school committee about the numbers of seats so that we can start getting people registered early, and that we know for the budget cycle. And of course, in our district improvement plan, that's a big part of our goal for that as well.
Any questions?
Just really briefly, you mentioned, we're having some visits for potentially interested students. Can you just tell me really briefly, like what does that look like? Like, who do they contact? What do they get when they visit? Like,
I think
How
it
does
looks
that
a little
work?
differently at each school.
Yeah, so I can
Yeah.
say at Smith Academy that they'll typically contact the office, they get put in touch with the guidance office. And usually it will result in either a shadow day or a shadow half day, where a student, occasionally the parents may come in first and meet with me or other folks at the school. But typically it'll be a shadow day. So they'll come for either part or a whole day to see what it's like going to classes and kind of get the whole feel of it. And they'll be paired with a student as well to kind of shadow.
At the elementary school, most people will contact Michelle Forget and set up an appointment to come tour the school. Sometimes we've had families come just by themselves without children, and then they may make a second appointment to come and tour with their child. And they're basically just kind of given a tour and walk through classrooms and just get to visit each room.
so is there like a is it Michelle who does the tours or like whoever's on?
Either one, myself or she. It depends on if there's a meeting I have to attend, but generally we kind of tag team that. I do it if I'm available, but otherwise she will.
Thanks.
Sometimes some come through my office as well, depending. And so I've depending on need or reason, I've been the point of contact for in both buildings around that, but then deferring to the principals so that they make that connection real quick too. But particularly at the end of last year, got quite a few folks that ended up joining our community, but it went through our the student services department.
Is there a plan in all three occasions for how you continue to sort of foster the relationship with those families between now when they visit and the period when they can actually officially apply? Is there like, do you invite them to an assembly? Do you invite, like, if there's stuff going on in the community, do you reach back out to those folks to kind of continue to foster that interest?
We haven't with, as you mentioned, with like assemblies and paparazzi and that kind of thing. We do have a sheet that we're tracking that we have all their contact information. So when it does open up, we'll reach back out to them. So we have that set to go. So we keep their information, but we haven't. That's a good idea to invite them back into some things.
To the concerts that
Yeah.
are coming up next
Concerts.
month.
Yep.
and-
Yeah, all school meetings.
I
That's a good
wonder,
idea.
Yeah.
I wonder too, we had talked before when we were talking about it potentially being helpful for families that are looking to choice in to connect with each other. So maybe even some type of social where all the families that are interested can get together, because then if they start talking to each other and figuring out geography and where they are,
Even with existing school
Yeah.
choice families
Hmm.
too.
and maybe have some of our, like some representatives that are current students or families or whatever at that.
We have started the conversation, kind of the planning for a specific kind of school choice open house later in the year, which would be not quite the same as the open house that we do, but specifically for folks who are interested in, for as you said, students who currently school choice and their families to come in and talk.
Awesome. Relationships, totally how you get there, right? Okay. So, Dr. Driscoll,
Solar.
Oh,
It's on there.
it's on there. Do you have?
It's on
silver-
the only thing I can say is that we're working now with the Cal representative. She's the town belongs to something called Cal, and has to do with a way to reduce our overall electrical bill. Our bill is so confusing that this person has said now she doesn't understand why all of that work that they've been doing isn't represented on the bills. And so they are, she's now reaching out for more information so that she can analyze the bills for us so that we can take a look at it a little bit more deeply. I mean, it may be there and it's just a very kind of a mess. So long story short, it's very difficult to see if we are saving anything in terms of money. For that partially that reason, but we are developing that tracker so that we will be able to report once I have a better handle on our electric bills overall.
So the last conversation we had about it in a budget meeting,
Mhm.
it did look like it might help offset the massive increase in electrical costs.
Yes.
So while we might not save, we might not get hit with a 50% hike.
Right.
Or all of the 50% hike. Okay. Sorry for jumping that. Okay, Dr. Driscoll.
I think, so I'll try to keep it brief because I think some of the updates I have we're going to be talking about later in the meeting as well. But I'd like to echo what Superintendent Wood said about our sports teams. We had a nice banquet last night for the fall sports teams, where all the student athletes were recognized. And a huge congratulations to the soccer teams for making it all the way to Western Mass Finals. It was quite a night to have both the boys and girls teams represented down in Agawam. It was a great experience. Boys won a great game against Granby. The only goal that was scored in the 3 games that those teams played against each other was during the championships. And the girls lost in a heartbreaker in overtime. So it was a really two great games of soccer. We had professional development on the 8th. It was a wonderful day. We had I've listed a number of the workshops that folks attended, both kind of on campus at Smith and off campus. They were tying strong learning objectives to the Mass State frameworks, cooperative learning and activity design. Those are both at Smith Academy. Then a geology, reading the rocks workshop, teaching artistic behaviors, credible sources, helping students with challenging behaviors, line dancing for PE, and supporting students' healthy choices was our health and adjustment counselor, which I thought were all great options. We'll have 2 field trips we talk about this evening. We'll talk about those when we get to them. And this week, students in 8th and 10th grade at Smith Academy, as well as 3rd through 6th at the elementary school, completed the SELIS survey. We'll be talking a bit more about that later on. But this is through a grant that we had got, that Melissa had applied for and got through the state for increasing kind of social emotional learning measures. We have invested now in a kind of data collection. So one of the gaps that we had identified was kind of we have MCAS results that we get every year. We have really sound practices in classrooms, but haven't had kind of a benchmarking system for a number of years at Smith Academy. So we've now we've gone, since we were already using iReady in math up through middle school. We are using their benchmark assessments up through. We'll be using them up through 10th grade, and in ELA as well. They have a similar assessment for ELA that measures those skills. So we'll be getting that product and getting training in that, so we can implement and use the data. And lastly, this I didn't share this during the mission moments because I was going to do it now anyway. But this is the kind of my mission moment from recent weeks. Was this past week I was able to share some great news with a number of our seniors who qualified for the John and Abigail Adams Scholarship, which is really, it's a tremendous amount of hard work that they put in over 4 years to get there. It was just really nice to be able to recognize them, to share that with them. And so those seniors are Charlotte Kavanaugh, Michael Cernak, Story Goldman, Logan Graves, Lily Pollard, and Haley Springman. And they've all put a tremendous amount of work in throughout the years and should be really proud of themselves, and as we are. And that's the update from Smith Academy.
You mentioned there's more coming on the SELIS. Okay.
Yes.
Then I will hold my questions. Other questions?
Again, sorry. Can you just explain what the John and Abigail Adams Scholarship is?
Yes, it's given out to a number of seniors based on MCAS performance, and the metric that they use is slightly. I'm not 100% clear on it. It's not like, if you score a certain amount, it's related to the number of students in the district or the area that take it, and that percentage get it. But it's based on the MCAS scores. It's the highest group.
But this comes like through the state of
It
Massachusetts.
comes to the state, yep, and it provides funding for any state school. So whether it be community college, like at UMass or Westfield State, any state school.
Covers tuition.
Covers
Tuition, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
If my numbers are right, 1 in 4 of our seniors earned that. So 6. It's fine.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, congratulations to them.
And one thing that I didn't mention, which I wanted to, and I didn't include in the update, was a thank you to the Trout Unlimited, to Fly Fishers International, and to the Hatfield Fish and Game Club for their donations to our fly fishing club. We'll be able to outfit our students with waders and fishing rods, and we're heading into the winter months, so we'll do some fly tying clinics and everything. So we'll be all set to go wade into the rivers in the spring.
How many kids are going to be in that?
Right now we have 3. Well, so it's an X Block club, and we haven't started it yet because we don't have any equipment. So now that we're able to purchase the equipment, we have 3 that are definitely interested, and 5 or 6 that have expressed that they would like to. So and I'm sure we'll get more as we go forward. Yeah.
Who is it open to?
Anyone, the entire school. Yep, 7th through 12th grade.
I've seen social media posts of who ties the best fly.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Get up for that. Okay. Other questions? So we're going to jump ahead, if you don't mind, and talk about the school trip to Guatemala.
Yeah, I'm sure you were surprised to hear that this was proposed since last year when we went to Panama. I said that the trips are every other year. I was also surprised, but this opportunity came along. Ruth Ann Fitzgibbons is the Spanish teacher at Hopkins, and we've worked together quite a bit over the last few years. We get together on professional development days, and we exchange all sorts of ideas about our curriculum and materials we use. And we also both use Squads Abroad for our trips. And in fact, in our first trip, when we went with them to Costa Rica, the school committee had asked me to kind of reach out to some other schools to make sure this was a legit program. And Ruth Ann had gone to Honduras with Squads Abroad as a teacher trip, and so she could vouch for them. So we've exchanged a lot of information about it. And she called me maybe a month ago, and said that she had this trip all set to Guatemala, and then I don't want to like put too many words in her mouth, but something happened with the athletic director and one of the coaches, like telling some of the kids that there might be games during April vacation, and basically all the athletes just dropped out of the trip because of that. And she only was left with 3 kids who wanted to go, who are all signed up, and one mom of one of the kids. And so she asked if we'd be interested in joining. And I wasn't sure. It sounded great. And I know that I wanted to lead a trip to Guatemala. So I thought this would be a great chance for me to get some firsthand experience and not just speak hypothetically about what I think a country would be like. Ruth Ann has spent time in Guatemala before. So she's been there and has a little bit more experience. And of course, I've taken 2 trips with this company, so I know all their protocols really well. So I talked to Mr. Wood and Mr. Driscoll and asked, like, basically, do you think I should find out about interest? And they both thought it was a good idea. We all like the idea of working with another school. Hopkins is our neighbor, and our students can often like to enclose themselves in this little bubble and not reach out to other schools, or I think it will be good for them to see kids from another school and for us to develop our relationship with Hopkins a little bit more. And so Mr. Driscoll and I kind of decided that we would just, since it's not like our trip, we're jumping onto their trip, that we would just keep it limited to seniors and juniors right now. There were a couple seniors who really regretted not going to Panama. They were on the fence and had started to sign up and then backed out, and they were really regretting that they didn't go. So this would be their only chance to do a trip. And then the 3 juniors who went on the trip last year, all 3 want to go again. And there's 2 more juniors one who wouldn't speak to her mother the whole February vacation last year because her mom didn't let her go to Panama, and 1 other. So we have 8 kids who want to go. I don't know how much you read. I shared Mr. Driscoll shared the slideshow that had all the information, the specifics, where the trip would be, how long it would be, the costs, what activities we'd be doing there, some of their information about the lodgings and their safety protocols. So I'm not quite sure other questions that you would have for me, but I'm happy to.
So how many of our kids are going?
Well, 8 have said solidly that they want to. You never know for sure until kids make a deposit if they will or not, but
And there were 3 Hopkins students.
yeah. So it's becoming more.
Yeah.
Ours, we're the bigger majority, but Ruth Ann is officially the trip leader because she's the one who organized it and started it, and I would be her second chaperone.
Is there a minimum number of students that need to make the trip happen?
I think it's 8 total. So I think we'll be pretty good. I think and I've always had, for such a small group or for such a small school, always the travel companies are amazed at how many kids that want to go on these trips, because other really big schools won't have a ton of kids who want to go. And I think it'll be nice for me to have a smaller group, because organizing 20 or 25 can be quite a handful. So having just a group of, with me and Ruth Ann, having 14 of us, I think will be a really nice number. So.
How do the costs compare to last year's trip?
Well, they're a little bit higher. I can't remember what the final price was for last year's trip. I had quoted them $2,500, hoping to come in a little under. And I think I came in a little under. Their quote that she had was $2,670. She did include in that something we fundraised for, which was we are required to make a $1,500 donation, and that buys all of our cement and our paint and hires local workers to help us and teach us how to do the physical work that's there. And I didn't have that included as part of my trip cost. And we raised money. We did the scone fundraiser, which I don't know if anybody of you bought our scones, but that we made enough money for that. She has that as part of the individual cost, but actually she's already applied for some grants and got them. So the price is going to come down a little bit on that. And she and I both want to do maybe the scone fundraiser again or something else. I'm not sure what else. But so I think the cost is pretty close. I mean, obviously each time we have a trip, it's probably going to go up a little bit, but it's in the ballpark, I would say.
I don't remember if I saw what the transportation is from here to the airport.
Yeah, because it's Bradley, we would just meet there like we did with Panama. If it's Logan, we rent a bus, but really, I mean, we have kids on this trip, there'll be a couple kids from Holyoke. So for them to come back to Smith and then take a bus to Hartford, the parents didn't seem to mind. It's not too bad of a trip there. And the bus added a decent amount of money to the trip, so.
How many students total did you have that went to Panama?
I can't remember if including me, and I think it was 20 total people. So 17 kids and 3 adults. Is that right? Does that sound right to you?
Yep.
Is there any concern about this putting a dent in next year's plans?
I don't think so, because I know that the sophomores are raring to go, and a couple of them approached me and I said, hold on, we'll still do one next year for you guys. And I think we'll absolutely be able to get the minimum amount, because also I have 22 ninth graders in my class, and then I have 14 10th graders, and quite a few have. After the Panama trip, our students went and did the students who went did presentations in each of my classes. So the younger kids they've seen it, they've heard, they're excited. Some of the juniors say still, we're going to go again next year too, but what they say and what their parents are willing to have them do might be 2 different things.
That was part of the rationale of having it for juniors and seniors too, was to make sure that we didn't put pressure on the trip that we offer.
Any other questions? Administration, do you guys have a point of view you want to share?
I think it would be great.
Yeah, strongly endorse it. I think the partnership is a great one, and maybe it's something we continue, next year re-lead, and
maybe we could offer them to join. That would be a different thing to think about, seeing how this goes. The dates, it's an April vacation instead of February. They would miss 1 school day and the rest would be all vacation days. That's one relief of not having to worry about a snowstorm on top of any other, when you travel, how you worry about things that could affect your trip. The February is, it's lovely down there in February, but it was scary with the possible snowstorm.
And I'll add to that, it works with our athletic schedule too.
It
which
does.
is better than February did.
Because February, like it's during tournament, and so Miss Lish doesn't have any control over what games get scheduled. But because April's early enough in the season, she can just not schedule games during that time.
Would you like a motion?
I would love a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve of the school trip to Guatemala, the joint trip with Hopkins.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Happy travels.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Back to the agenda and administration reports. Principal Petra.
Yeah. Pull it up. Me too.
So we conducted our Title I reading night as part of getting funds from the state. We invited Natasha Lowe, local author from Deerfield, who celebrated her 10th anniversary by reading a chapter of her book, Poppy, I don't remember the title.
No,
Poppy, Poppy Pendleton.
yeah, something like that. Haley loves those books.
Yeah, we had about 50 people come out to have pizza and cookies, and we played bingo, and every student who was there left with a free book. So that was fun. Again, we welcome back our reading consultant from the University of Hartford, Teresa, who this time worked with our upper grade students, or upper grade teachers, I should say. So we went in again en masse, prepared them for the fact that we would all be sitting there watching their guided reading lessons. And then when Teresa does her debrief, I take notes that's not specific to a particular teacher, but then I share that out with all the staff so that they can hear some of the feedback that she presented. She's due to come back the first week in December. And she'll be visiting now, again, the first floor teachers. So every other time she's here, it's either first or second floor. So our 3rd through 6th graders and also our 8th and 10th, no, is it just 8th and 10th? Okay. Participated in a CELIS survey. We asked parents if they would be all right with having us assess their students and or participate in this survey. This particular survey, we applied for this grant partly because this is where I was looking to purchase the books, which I still can do, but was literally looking to want to partner with Yale University and that emotional intelligence. So the plan was to purchase books and do a book study with staff on Mark Brackett's Permission to Feel. This comes with a curriculum, basically, that teaches kids to understand how to regulate their emotions, recognize their emotions, understand them, label them. And I think this is going to definitely help with that whole idea of being able to understand more of their emotions, regulating them. This particular survey was enticing to Connor and I when we were kind of looking at this over the summer, because we felt like it would be an opportunity, because yes, we get vocal data from grades 4, 5, 7, and 8, or 8 and 10. The DESE does do surveying of our students after MCAS, but only in specific grades. We elongated that, and I said that we were going to test our students or survey our students in grades 3 through 6. So there's 2 times that they're taking this survey, once in the fall and once in the spring. So we actually don't disaggregate that data. The state actually does. So there we have the test administration. It's very specific in the protocols around getting the permission from parents, uploading them onto a specific site, or at least providing them a username and password. And then we only have a small window of time in which to complete that survey. DESE right now currently is disaggregating that data. And then Connor and I have 2 different webinars that we need to attend, where they go through and walk us through how they are disaggregating that data. Because basically, when the whole survey is based on the Castle's framework of self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. And the test administration was around 45 minutes. Actually, I'm sorry, 20 to 25 minutes, and had 45 questions. And all the questions were framed in the same way. And it's not like in the vocal data, they don't want you looking at the questions. But in this particular one, because there's no audio for 3rd graders, and we asked our 3rd graders to take this, I got to read aloud them to small groups who had that accommodation. in their ed plan or 504. And the questions were all related to, I had a sample question here. There were 4 courses they had to answer in one of 4 ways. The questions were all centered around the same area of how easy or how hard is this? Very easy, easy, hard, or very hard. And it's things like knowing what my strengths are. How easy or hard is it for a student to recognize what their strengths are? Knowing what I am interested at school. Planning ahead so I can turn a project in on time. Getting through something even when I feel frustrated. Knowing how my actions impact my classmates. Recognizing when I am comfortable, recognizing when I am making someone uncomfortable. Sharing what I am feeling with others. Asking a classmate to do their fair share of a group project. Saying no to a friend who wants to break the rules. Taking responsibility for my choices. So those are just like a sampling from those 5 categories, from the CASEL categories, that these questions were kind of based out of. So it's more of an inventory of how a student can identify those things within themselves. So we're hoping that this kind of data can be used, even though I can purchase the books this year. I can definitely make the plan to do more of this work next year with our staff. I think they would have been very overwhelmed if I had said, oh, you're going to do a whole new math program. Oh, and by the way, we're also going to do a social emotional new program as well. I think that would have put them over the edge. So math definitely took a priority, not that social emotional learning isn't. But again, this would give us more information about where our students are at so we can make a better plan for next year and possibly look at other additional curriculum. I mean, we do have second step that we are using in most grades. And then we've pulled in the bullying prevention that our staff are going to begin using the curriculum in January. So they've been going through the tutorials right now. And all students in grades K to 6 will be doing that this spring. And the zones of regulation as well. Thank you. And then the last thing, that, as Connor said, the November in-service, many of the staff in the elementary stayed with me to do iReady for math, but I did have some staff go out to do learn some more things about writing, geology, and social justice.
I have a question. Are there teachers this year also that are getting up and running on foundations?
So kindergarten and first grade are absolutely doing foundations right now. I purchased the materials for K and 2 and 3, but did not find, I was looking for a train the trainer model. My understanding and feedback that I had received from the first grade teachers was that the 1-day training that they had online wasn't extremely helpful. It was things like, take the cellophane off of the container. Now turn to page 1. And they were like, no. So I had reached out to the district curriculum coordinators in Northampton and in Deerfield and others to see if they actually were using foundations, if they had a train-the-trainer model. None of them did. A few did say that they were going to be sending or using some of the videos. There was 2 different kinds, I guess, that were out that I was not, at the time I was researching it was only one that I had gotten feedback on. So at this point, next year over the summer, I plan on training all 2nd and 3rd grade teachers because it only goes up to grade 3.
Okay. So does that mean though that if kids were in first grade last year and started it, that it's now discontinued for them in grade 2?
Yes and no. They are still following a phonics model, but it's not specifically through foundations. Our 2nd grade teachers last year knew that they needed to do some type of work with phonics. So they created their own scope and sequence, particularly because at the time, Kim Robinson, who was teaching 2nd grade, knew that she was starting to do some of those OG things. So she and Laura Hoy actually created an entire scope and sequence of teaching phonics for 2nd grade before foundations even came into play. So they do have kind of a spelling scope and sequence that they've been following based on that.
Is there any more of a picture you can paint us what the benchmarking is going to look like when it comes back? Is it information that gets digested down per pupil, by grade, just by school? We know what MCAS looks like when it comes back in. Help us understand what this might look like, just so we...
According to them, and from what I had seen on when they had sent us the PowerPoint, they have the 5 core competencies scaled scores and the total social emotional scaled scores, they say can be aggregated to the district, the school, the grade, and the classroom, and by student groups. So we should be able to see how all of our 3rd graders answered those questions and where they kind of feel like they were as is in each grade. And if we needed to, because we had done this through their LASIDs, I'm understanding potentially, we could actually even disaggregate this more into gender, low income status, race, ethnicity, English language learner status, disability status, and any other groupings that we may have put in. So that will remain to be seen. I don't know if enough of what we had put in, because we had just provided as a username and password, the recommendation was their LASID, which doesn't, I don't believe, tied to any other, you can correct me if I'm wrong, so it's not tied to any other marker other than they're a Hatfield Elementary student or they're a Smith Academy student. So what we should be getting then at least is grade specific data on how that grade answered those questions.
Okay, did all students in those grades participate?
No, we definitely, I had about 8 people that opted out.
We had none.
And how do you see using what comes back to impact where you go next?
So our school counselor is also going to be involved with this as well. So yes, we know we look at and we get samples of different curriculums. We might be using this kind of data to search out a curriculum if we're finding that a lot of our students in one particular aspect or category need more additional work. This is also kind of tied to this whole notion of our MTSS as well. So does this information possibly justify adding an additional part-time counselor? Do we need to do more work because we have students who have are showing that we have students who are feeling that they're not able to understand their emotions and feelings, and therefore that's impacting their peer relations. We might need to do more work around that, and then figuring out how to do that. So we can also approach this as a tiered as well. We have classroom teachers doing everything with the entire class as a tier 1. We might find that we have to do something differently to provide more additional support for students in a tier 2 model, whether that's a push in, whether that's a pull out, whether that's again a part-time counselor who comes in to do more work with a smaller group of students.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I have one-
I was just going to ask, is this going to be done again next year? So I know it's going to be done in the spring.
Right.
But a year from now, is there plans to repeat this so that we follow up and see what impact we've had?
We very well could. In fact, I was thinking about that. Now, the grant, this particular grant is a 1-year grant, but there is a second cohort. So it's possible that this grant will be opened up again and we could reapply to do this. Sorry, thank you. To do this again. If we didn't, because all these questions we have copied and have in front of us, it's possible that we could create our own survey and can give this to students again. We can still have the same, do it as a Google form and see if our numbers change at all. And we can see and track those students from 3rd grade into 4th. So do they answer it a little differently? And it would also be interesting to correlate that to then the vocal data, because we only get vocal data on grades 4 and 5. So this way we can actually see the progression and growth from our 3rd graders as 3rd graders now to being 4th graders next
That's what
year.
I was thinking about.
Yes.
Is
It'd be nice to
tracking.
track it. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then to be able to compare 3rd grade to 3rd grade from previous, like just to
Right.
start seeing that too.
Right.
I know that it was in the notes. I'm sorry, but iReady is right now K through 10 for math.
The curriculum is used K through 8, I believe.
Yes,
right?
yep, K,
K,
yep.
and it goes up through 8th grade. The benchmark assessment is used up through 10th grade.
Thank you.
Has been purchased. It's not current. We haven't used it yet because we just bought it. Have to get trained on how to administer and how to disaggregate the data.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
A lot of juicy. Director Bremner.
Hello.
Hello.
I did have a little bit of staffing update, I guess. So we did welcome Renee Petrie as our new SLP since our last meeting, but very shortly after that. And she has jumped in with both feet, and she was able to consult with Kate and Lori before her first day. So she was really able to jump right in. Kathy Lawton will be serving temporarily as our long-term special education teacher at PGS to cover a maternity leave that has started. Her position has been posted as well. We will continue with the posting for a certified teacher. Kathy is nearing the end of her special education teacher preparation program at Westfield State, and I continue to be a certified special education teacher, mild, moderate, K to 8, and severe pre-K to 22. So much like last year when we had some maternity leaves, I will partner with her to ensure that services are appropriately provided, paperwork's completed, proposals are made by a certified teacher, and evaluations are completed. So I already hit the ground running with some evaluations, which I actually love and geek out on. So no worries there. We continue to have a van driver position posted, but we were able to provide, we had that one run that we were really struggling with. And as Mr. Wood put in his report, we found King Gray is now doing 70 runs. So we partnered with them, and I appreciate my contact in Northampton that gave me that suggestion, because if you look up King Gray, it looks like charter buses only, but they have a whole 7D thing that they do. Professional development, our preschool team with our inclusion specialists have continued to work with the pyramid model and our coach, Marlene Robbins. They spent a significant portion of November 8th on this topic. And again, the pyramid model is kind of preschool centered MTSS. I, as Michael said, I am presented on MTSS with a connection of the history of disabilities and inclusion in the United States for a group of educators through the collaborative on the 8th. Smith Academy also engaged in 2 sessions, not on the 8th, but on X block days of professional development around executive functioning skills. For accountability, our office partnered with Ben to complete the student enrollment report for October. We were notified that one of our funding streams is being audited from last year. This is our circuit breaker. And circuit breaker is arguably the more complex funding stream we have. So it's when the needs of students exceed quadruple the foundation, there's an algorithm where we get some additional funds back. And this is based on the grid services that they receive, or if there was specialized equipment or some other special thing that was purchased for that particular student with higher needs. So we prepared and submitted the requested documents. It appears to be routine. I shared in email the letter they sent us. There was no major concerns to report. I pulled everything and went through it with Michael. So if something comes out, I'll let you know, but nothing, I'm not worried about anything right now. Our special ed teachers that will be working with students to submit MCAS alt portfolios have attended the required annual trainings and reviewed the updated guidance. So MCAS, for students with disabilities, MCAS really has 4 options. So, and I did provide you the decision-making flow chart. Even though it looks like it lands on 3, there's a hidden one within those 3. So students with disabilities can take the MCAS as is, period, full stop, no accommodations if not needed. Or they can take the MCAS, the traditional MCAS with accommodations. These can be accommodations that are available to everybody, universal access accommodation. There are some that are not universal access, but also don't impact any score. There are a few special access accommodations, which does impact score a little bit, but doesn't impact graduation requirements. This is like the read aloud for English, whereas like the read aloud in math is not a special access accommodation. Or a student can submit a competency portfolio. So this is often for students who have, they might have significant mobility or expression needs, where they need to, or fatigue or a medical issue or a mental health issue, where the act of sitting with a test in one time period, even with the accommodations, it's just not functional, it's not accessible. So they can do the MCAS through a competency portfolio, which is a collection of work samples, but they're grade level and aligned, and it's actually a very high bar to meet in that way. And again, all of those three, MCAS as is, MCAS with accommodations, or competency, can result still in a high school diploma. The fourth is MCAS alternative portfolio. And so this is for students who access multi-grades below grade level curriculum regularly, and that's their access point for due to the severity of their disability. And you can see there's some other requirements here, and this includes and I'm realizing I might have given you the old one. I might need to update the one I'm giving you because I'm realizing it looks slightly different. They updated it 2 years ago, but it's similar anyways. The alt portfolio is, again, that collection of work samples throughout the year, but they also collect information on level of independence. And they also need to have like a self-reflection on every piece of work. So it's pretty in-depth, but the kids have ownership over it. They make an artistic cover, that kind of thing. And there is regulation that districts shouldn't have more than 1% of their population doing an alt. Obviously, that's somewhat arbitrary and can hit us in a small district. But we do have a couple kiddos that do that. And there's two added regulations that are required for the alt that were put in place the past couple of years. One is that staff have to go to a formal training every year, whereas for the other versions, they don't have to do that. They have to go through training with the principals, but this is like a state training. And then we have to inform parents through a letter, which if we are having the discussion about an alt, I just copy and paste it right into the meeting notes, that there's a risk at grade 10 if they're still on an alt, that it may impact their ability to get a high school diploma if they're on an alternative portfolio. So our staff that will be doing those with the couple kiddos that we have, they have gone to their trainings.
Questions?
So if you're doing the MCAS alt, you're getting a certificate of completion versus a high school diploma, but you can
Only at grade 10. So up until that point, there's no risk to your diploma up until that grade 10 point. MCAS. So 3rd through 8, the students who need to do the alt, our purpose is to try and get them to a point where they're ready to onboard at the grade level, whether that's a competency portfolio or the traditional MCAS with accommodations. But it's really that 10th grade that is at a risk. But the regulation requires the parents be notified by letter early on, like when so even in 3rd grade, if that's the discussion, I'm obligated to give them that letter, which I just attached to the notes, that there is that future risk in 7 years, just so that it's all very transparent in that way.
Got it. Thank you.
Are students generally able to transition from an alt to the standard tests?
Some are. So, there's, like I said, the regulation asks that no more than 1% of our population takes an alternative portfolio. So it really is students with the most significant cognitive disabilities traditionally. So it all depends. That's the goal. And you can also do a bit of both. So you can take the traditional MCAS with accommodations in ELA, but maybe you are still an alt for math because of the discrepancy in your profile or how far behind. Sorry, I don't want to say far behind, but at what instructional level you're at that's discrepant from your grade level. So we do that. That's often like a midway point, is that we can try like, all right, we'll get on for ELA or we'll get on for math because that's that personal strength, and then try and work up that other one.
But in 10th grade, an alt for any portion of it will result in a non-diploma.
If you don't pass the MCAS between your 10th grade year and your senior year, you will not get a diploma as the law is written now.
Do we get red flagged at all for being, percentage-wise? You said it has to be less than 1%, but we have one kid that's like 4%.
Yeah, no, it's really, they put in, and Michael can correct me on this, but they put out that regulation, and it's what we all aim for and document. But it's only when it's quite substantial that you end up getting asked about it. So it's still quite small for our percentage of students, even in our small district. So.
In particular, because we might run a program that would be most appropriate for
Exactly.
students where we would tuition folks in, and the state would understand, I assume.
Yeah, but tuition students are still under the EDA that they come from, so their MCAS results would remain with their district. I didn't want to see them since we did it, but in terms of accountability, that would be related to their sending district if we had a tuitioned-in student. That's not.
Okay, so while we're on it, we talked about alt portfolios, but the three options before that, do you know what percentage of our students are using some type of accommodation for MCAS?
So I think what's important to identify is there's different levels of accommodation. So the universal accommodations are available to all students, but for best practice, so that we make sure that they're really practicing it, we tend to put them in the IEPs or 504. So for example, clarifying test directions, it's available to every single student. We usually check that box so it's definitely in the document IEP or 504. So the amount that are written in is probably nearly all, but specialized accommodations are smaller than that. I can pull those stats for you if you'd like.
Just looking for a rough sense. Most students on an IEP or 504 plan would fall into that category.
Of the universal only, and then a smaller portion. Yeah, I would have to pull more stats for you, but I would say maybe 10% have some kind of specialized beyond the list that there's a couple layers. Yeah.
Layered list. Okay. Other questions?
I just was curious, is anybody opting, are we having any students opt out at third grade? No?
We had 100% participation last year, and I hope that should continue. Technically, the state doesn't acknowledge or say that students are allowed to opt out. So,
Would you guys mind, since we're very MCAS focused, if we skipped if we skipped ahead and then came back so that we just continue on talking about MCAS for a few minutes?
Sure.
Is that okay with the committee?
Mhm.
Okay. So shifting gears to the MCAS presentation.
So in your packet, you have now two items of background on the MCAS. So you have the graphs that you would find on DESE, if anybody in the community wanted to go onto them and look at the performance results. And then
We might just all want to look and see if the graphs that you think are there are the graphs that we got.
okay. If they're not there, they will be.
Okay,
I'll put it that way.
excellent.
Yeah. And then we also broke it out by the numbers of students in each of the performance categories. And what the principals are here tonight to do is to kind of go over the performance with an analysis of the information that you have. And so that we're going to, drill down to what they see as happening for the students. So
It does appear that it says it was updated September 29th, so it does appear accurate on the state website.
The state website stuff, I'm just talking about what went out to us in the packet, did not necessarily have charts. It had data.
it's the bar graphs, right?
No, this I pulled from the website. That's not what our stuff
That's
looked
not what
like.
we got.
So I think I sent you a screen grab earlier today.
I can
Because-
show you.
Because I was pretty sure what your intent was not this.
It's just,
Yeah, there was a link though.
Yes, and what the link was, I printed for the committee, what was
Okay.
on the link. So, which had just sort of the
Right.
language arts 3 to 8.
Right. The performance.
In broad spectrum, yes.
Yeah. Right. That's how DESI reports it. Those are DESI graphs.
These I think the data that was in the presentation
Yeah.
was more detailed than these graphs.
Okay.
And it looked like there probably was planned to be a graph there that went with the data on the page. So it might just be a technology hiccup.
Maybe. Oh, look. But we do have the analysis.
Which
so
is the, well,
most
I
important
think we're
part.
all happy to listen to the analysis.
You want to go first with the
Sure.
10th grade?
Sure. Are we going to present the slideshow that was in the packet?
I think that, yeah, you're just going to read through your analysis on your,
Okay.
on
our
your
slides.
scores.
Fantastic. All right. So we'll jump right into Smith Academy then, because you have the link for the district profile, which can get you into the tables, and we can go right into. So the way I broke these down, which made sense to me, was kind of broadly for the subject. So we'll start with ELA, and there's a lot of numbers on here.
that's what he said to skip.
I know, but I think there's a way to, okay.
Do you want me to?
No, keep going.
So, so I broke it down by subject. So first up, we have ELA. We have 7th, 8th, and 10th graders that take ELA at Smith Academy. So the first line up at the top is 7th grade ELA for Smith Academy. That's 7 ELA SA, which it shows the number of students, the percentage of students rather, that scored in the exceeded expectations category, which was 0%. The meeting expectations category, which is 56%, partially meeting expectations, which is 36%, and not meeting, which was 9%. Directly below that, you can see the state average, which was the 7 ELA state. That is the line that starts with that. So comparatively, the state averaged 5% of students exceeding, 36% meeting, 40% partially meeting, and 19% not meeting. So, as you compare those, you can see that we had fewer students exceeding expectations, a higher percentage of students meeting, a slightly lower percentage of students partially meeting, and then a lower percentage not meeting. You can look at 8th grade similarly. We, with the state, the Smith Academy versus state data there. And then you can look at the same for 10th grade. So generally speaking now, so those are the grade level breakdowns and comparisons. Generally speaking, there were higher rates of meeting expectations, lower rates of exceeding expectations, and sorry, it's smaller on my screen here. Lower rates of not meeting, which is good. We want a lower rate of not meeting expectations. That's what we're shooting for, and similar rates of partially meeting expectations. So the take home point is for this year as a kind of a new baseline year is that we're lined up pretty close to the state average, generally speaking. An interesting thing I wanted to point out, and this is data that's not available kind of publicly, but we can kind of dive a little deeper, is what I call the cuspers of this data. So that's students that were fewer than 10 points from the next level. So, there's a cutoff of partially meeting expectations versus meeting expectations. So that equates to anywhere from 1 to 3 questions over the full 2 days of testing that the students have. So 17% of students who are meeting expectations, 42% of students who are partially meeting expectations, and 100% of students who are not meeting expectations in the 7th grade were all cuspers. So students that were really, really close to that next level. In 8th grade, it was 31% of students who are meeting were right on the edge of exceeding. 57% of students who are partially meeting were right on the edge of meeting. 40% of students who are not meeting were right on the edge of partially meeting. And then in 10th grade, 13% of students who are meeting were close to exceeding. 50% of partially meeting students who are in that partially meeting category were right next to that level of meeting, and 100% of students who are not meeting were right within a few points of meeting. So I thought that was an interesting. Piece to share, and I don't know what that compares to statewide because we don't have access to that level beyond our district. Questions about ELA before we head to math?
Just so that I'm understanding. So the 10 points, 1 to 3 questions, you said?
Yeah. So it's not 10. It's not 10 percentage points. It's 10 points of the scaled score. And so so that's it could be 1 question. It could be 3 questions. ELA is gets a little more kind of wonky because they have the open response questions too, which are scored slightly differently. But yeah, generally that's 1 to 3 questions that a student could have gotten wrong that would have put them into the next category. So for math, broken down similarly, we can see the comparison. So 7th grade is the example to start with. 0% of students exceeding expectations, 27% meeting, 67% partially meeting, and 6% not meeting. Statewide, 7% were exceeding, which is more than we had. 31% were meeting, which is slightly more than we had. 44% were partially meeting. And then 19% were not meeting statewide. So you can see those comparisons there as well. Again, 7, 8, and 10th grade. 9th graders don't take MCAS in math and ELA. And again, generally speaking, looking at broad trends here, we saw higher levels of partially meeting expectations. The lower levels of exceeding, which we wouldn't like to see. We would like higher levels of exceeding. Lower levels of meeting. Again, we would want higher levels of that. But we did have lower levels of not meeting expectations, which is good. So we sort of saw this trend towards the middle of the road. And again, breaking out by cuspers, those students were pretty close. 22% of students in 7th grade who were meeting were pretty close to exceeding. 27% of partially meeting were close to meeting, and 100% of students who were not meeting were right on the edge of partially meeting. 8th grade, 46%, 0% who were meeting were really close to that exceeding category, but 46% who were partially meeting, so nearly half were right on the edge of meeting expectations. And then in 0% who were not meeting were close to meeting. And then in 10th grade, 14% of those who were meeting were close. 63% of those who were partially meeting were right on the edge of meeting, and 100% of those who were not meeting. And then if we, I guess questions for math before we dive into science?
81% partially meeting in 8th grade
Mhm.
seems rather significant.
It does. It's a large number.
What do we do with that number? Like, where does this lead you?
Well, part of that is thinking about the math program that we've adopted this year. Is something to really focus in on that. And part of the data that we get from the diagnostics that we do with the iReady is really targeting. Okay, so you have 81% of students that were were partially meeting expectations at this point last year when they took this. So, what did those questions that they got wrong? What did they all have in common? Were they all from a specific topic of math? Were they all related to algebraic thinking? Were they all related to something else? Or were there trends where there were a couple holes? So we can use that to try to identify and fill those gaps where they exist. I would say that was a fairly significant spike when you're looking at the bar graphs. That's kind of like a spear sticking up. So I'm hoping that that this MCAS trends, what they can tell us, is kind of a general trend of, hey, this is where we need to grow, and that's exactly how we can use it. Okay, now we can say we need more data about what specifically the gaps are for these students, and then how we can fill that. And part of that comes through a program like we've looked at this year. Part of that comes through the teachers being able to look at that data as well as the data that they have from their own assessments, saying, okay, this is what we're doing to address it.
Do you get any information from MCAS directly about which areas of math that was a struggle, or is it just through the iReady assessments that we'll get there?
You can. That's one thing that's nice about the computer-based model that they've shifted to, is that you can do item analysis and you can look at that, and you can kind of drill down there. I don't have that information tonight to share about what the specific areas are, but you can do that.
So I think I know where the confusion is. So I gave you the link to the state site, and if you go to the assessment bar at the top tab on the left-hand side, you can pick the area of diving deep into the analysis. So item analysis is one of those deep dives that you can make. And so we can look at those, and teachers can work with each other to see in what grade, at what year, they're not touching on geometry, for example, which is usually a question that plagues every district. And so you can look at where that comes, if that's an area of concern, and where that can pop up. In terms of what they present, in terms of information for us to look at teaching, there's a lot of rich detail information.
And the other kind of information we get is kind of programmatic, which I think is interesting. And this really targets specifically to that 8th grade piece. What you were asking about, Adam, is and this. So last week during our PD day, we had one of the sessions we had was looking at.
Here it is.
Oh, thank you.
Great.
Oh, perfect. Well, one of the sessions we had was looking directly at the standards and what was taught in the classes, and looking at the new program, and it was really interesting for the teachers to have those conversations, say, oh well, because we do we do algebra, then geometry, then this, there's this kind of almost a gap that's built into the program of studies, which can possibly come out. So then, okay, what do we need to do to backfill some geometry during 8th grade, which might now be taught during 9th grade, or vice versa, algebra 1, to make sure that we're hitting those before they take MCAS.
Okay, so there's kind of a little bit of like teaching to the test.
Yeah. There is. Yep. And looking at the test to say if that if it makes sense that gap may exist. And then as we get into 10th grade, where kind of everything should be kind of fleshed out by that point, we see we tend to see those things kind of iron out.
And just to,
Mhm.
because I pulled it up, geometry was a strength for the 8th graders.
Right.
It was the other functions, stats, and those kind of things.
Statistics and probability.
Which, if you think about the pattern of, they had, last year was pretty well intact for school, but the year before was the gap. So what the 8th graders would have had in 7th grade was virtual. So, that's a big component of this.
But I think as we look at statewide comparisons, that's going to be true across the state.
Certainly.
So
Mhm.
it's the comparisons that I find
It seems to have
stark.
disproportionately affected us.
I don't know if this is just looking at tables. What I picture in my head is sort of the state bell curve. And it seems fairly consistently that we sort of are all about the belly of the curve,
Right.
and we don't have the ends.
And that's come out pretty clearly in the results that we saw this year. The other piece to remember too is that being as small as we are, when you have, we can have students, if you have a population of 14 students taking a test, or 16 in a grade level, when you have a couple students who may be underperforming on that particular day for whatever reason, that can really skew your results. So this is it is important to remember that this is one assessment given over 2 days back to back for these students. So if someone's sick, if someone someone has something going on at home, when you have a population of 16 who are taking a test versus a district of 3,000, then you have a much more kind of zeroed in viewpoint. Things can get skewed pretty quickly. For science, technology, and engineering, at the 8th, so students take this at the in 8th and 9th grade, even though it gets reported as 10th grade, because 9th grade is where they take the assessment. So even though they report it as 10th grade because that's when they take the MCAS to graduate, it's really the 9th graders who take it. Although there were some there because of how COVID worked, there were some 10th graders who took it as well. But this is kind of, they're all lumped, all the 9th and 10th graders who took it, everyone who took it is lumped into that 10th grade thing here. But so for 8th grade, you can see, again, that kind of trend towards the middle. 41% exceed, 0% exceed, 41% meet, 53% partially meet, and 6% didn't meet. Statewide comparison, they had 6% who exceeded, a lower number that met, a lower number that partially met, and a much higher number that did not meet. For 10th grade, we had 0% exceeding, 56% meeting, 31% partially meeting, and 10% not meeting. Statewide comparison, we had a much higher percentage of students who met the expectations than the state did. Lower percentage who exceeded, and a lower percentage who partially met, and a lower percentage who did not meet. So that was a relative strength for us, was our 9th grade science, technology, engineering scores. Yeah, quite. It's a little different to talk about kind of the trends in science and technology, only because they take them so far apart. It's not a year-to-year thing. But generally, there were higher levels of meeting and partially meeting, lower levels of exceeding and not meeting. And then we had a strong performance from our 9th grade, even though it's reported for our 10th grade. And it didn't give, well, that comes out in the next slide, the growth trends. Science, technology, engineering questions? All right. So growth, in terms of growth trends, this is something that I looked at comparing kind of year to year classes with themselves. So basically, when you're in, say you're in 7th grade, you take the math MCAS. When you're in 8th grade, you take the math MCAS. It's not the same test. The test is designed to be harder because it's based on those standards. But you'd still ideally like to see the scaled score of the test either being the same or going up. That's growth. So if you get the same score, 7th grade to 8th grade, the same scaled score, that would be kind of typical growth. But we're looking to go beyond that. So generally, student growth trends were negative in 7th and 8th grade. That doesn't indicate that students went backwards or slipped back. It just means that they didn't, if they say their scaled score was a 540 or something in 1 year, and it might have been like a 535. So that would be negative growth, even though the test is harder. So it's not like a student's declining in their in their learning, but they didn't grow. So generally, growth trends were negative in the 7th and 8th grade, indicating no or negative growth. Which is kind of plateaued scaled scores or declining scaled scores. Similar trends existed in 10th grade math. 10th grade ELA saw 40% of high growth, which means 10 points or higher, and 47% low growth, with only 12% having no or negative growth. So 10th grade was showed that growth increasing. Compared to the growth on the 2021 test, which was that kind of that pandemic year coming out of it, the trend was positive. It was a good trend because the amount of kind of negative growth was less. So we saw fewer students growing less and more students growing more. Even though the trend was still kind of negative growth, it was less negative growth than elsewhere, or than the year past. If that makes any sense. And
It does now, and it didn't when I read it.
Yeah.
So.
Specifically, in average across all tests from 2019 to 2021, 79% of students at Smith Academy had negative growth, compared to 56% this year. So we're moving the right direction in that sense. I think that's it for me.
When you compare year-to-year scores,
Mhm.
is it looking at the whole school that took it last year versus the whole school that took it, or is it looking at the same group of students?
It's looking at the same students, because if they weren't enrolled both years, it wouldn't have included them. Yeah.
MCAS questions? Do we have a highlight from the elementary?
Highlight? Well, we have data to share, but I mean, as far as I didn't go into detail with because this is kind of like the new baseline, right?
Mhm.
Because this was since we shut down, they didn't do MCAS in 2020. Since last time they took MCAS 2 days in a row, doing this like they did this past year. It's been since 2019. So really looking at this as kind of like a clean slate. This is where we're kind of starting, and we can only move forward and up. So grade 3, I did a similar kind of setup when I saw how Connor had done it. So I did the same thing. So you can see the exceeding a percentage of students exceeding, meeting, partially meeting, or not meeting our scores for the 3rd grade versus the state expectation. The good news is we had, at least in the 3rd grade, a higher percentage of students who actually did exceed. We didn't have as many as meeting, but it was a very small, significant drop in the percentage. We were about even with the state when it came to the partially meeting, and we had less students than the state in the not meeting. For grade 4, we We matched them in the exceeding percentage. We had unfortunately had more students. Fortunately, we had more students meeting expectations in grade 4 for ELA. We were the same for partially meeting, and we had less students, which is a good thing than the state, for not meeting expectations. Grades 5, we didn't have any students exceeding. We had more students than the state meeting expectation. We had, unfortunately, more students partially meeting, but we had 0 in the not meeting. So that was actually 13% higher than the state. For grade 6, the state had 8% where we had 0 and exceeding. We had a higher percentage than the state for meeting expectations. We unfortunately had a higher percentage of partially meeting than the state did. And we had less students percentage-wise than the state for not meeting. So our partially meeting was higher than our meeting numbers. Grades 4 and 6 had a slightly higher meeting percentage than the state, and our percentage of students not meeting was less than the state, which is always a good thing. Any questions on ELA? For math and for science, I kind of combined them since grade 5 is the only grade that takes science, the science, technology, engineering assessment. So for math, grade 3, we had less exceeding than the state. We had fewer percentage of students meeting expectations than the state. We had more students partially meeting than the state, and we had more students not meeting than the state. That's actually not surprising. That was not surprising data for me. Grade 4, the state had more exceeding students. We had less meeting. We had a lot more partially meeting than the state did, but we also had fewer percentage of students not meeting expectations. For grade 5 in math, we had 0% exceeding. We had fewer students meeting expectations compared to the state. We had a lot more partially meeting than the state, but we also had smaller numbers of percentage of students, 11% not meeting expectations. For science, we didn't have any students exceeding expectations compared to the state. We did have more meeting expectations, 46 to their 36. We did have more students partially meeting expectations than the state did, but we had fewer numbers of students not meeting expectations, where the state was 12% higher. And in grade 6 for math, again, we had 0 students in the exceeding expectations. We had more students meeting expectations, more students who were partially meeting than the state's 43, and we had 4% not meeting where the state had 15. So overall, the state percentage of meeting were higher than ours, except for our 6th grade, and we definitely had a higher percentage of students partially meeting than the state. So I'm excited to see what this new math program will do, particularly since they were very excited about and were asking for a new math program, understanding that generally the guideline is it takes 2 to 3 years until we really will significantly see some change in growth. But I do know that our teachers are already noticing a significant change and growth in what they've been seeing in the past compared to how they started the program this past fall. Our students definitely look like deer caught in the headlights a little bit with some of the math terms and the ways they were doing it. But I'm excited to see what our winter diagnostic data shows in comparison to how students have been progressing. Any questions about Hatfield Elementary?
Do we know how, this is probably not a reasonable question. Do we know how, like, other schools that use iReady, how they have done on MCAS scores?
That's a good question. No, I should find that data out. That would be good to know.
Probably figure that out a bit.
Yeah.
Like getting the names of the districts that are using it.
You know, how long have they been using it, and what have their trends been, and where do they?
This
Very well.
particular iteration, though, I believe is only been out a year or 2.
Right. So this time, I mean, not only in my previous district, we were doing iReady benchmarking 3 times a year, but had adopted Wit and Wisdom as the math curriculum. So this time, at least, iReady is the math program, and as well as we are progress monitoring and benchmarking with the same program. So it'd be interesting to see the districts that are actually using iReady exclusively as a curriculum and as, you know, incorporating their assessment system versus those who are just doing their benchmarking, but have a completely different math curriculum. But I can ask around.
Thank you.
So I am reporting on special populations. This data is all embedded in the data you already heard. So all of the data that both principals presented, that was our whole data. That was inclusive of all special populations. The piece about the state data, and particularly if you play around with the link that that is available if you Google it, or that Mr. Wood put at the beginning of this, you won't find data if there's less than 10 students that are in that special population. So there's a couple grades we can look at low income versus not, but most grades we can't. We can't look at ELL data other than, individually we can. We look at student data all the time, but from a trend and public reporting stance. And so I pulled what I could for students with disabilities because in any given grade we have like 3 to 14. And so, and this includes students on a 504 plan, so any student labeled with a disability. So grades 3 and 6 can be reported because we had 14 students identified with disabilities in 3rd grade last year and 10 in 6th. 4, 5, 8, and 10 had too few to report. But I did pull that in some congregate data from 3rd through 8 together. It lets me lump those together in total, and 5 and 8 for science. So I was able to present some of that as well.
Can I just interrupt just for a second? It's just because nomenclature drives me crazy. They're not consistent. So special populations on the site is verified or discussed in subgroups. So if the public or you are trying to figure out where she's getting her data, on the left-hand column, you have to go to subgroups, accountability by subgroups, and then you can get the breakdown of all the subgroups.
I think we all saw a little more data on this in our packet because there were some extra charts.
Yep.
In the interest of time, do we want to summarize the highlights?
Yep. So I made these charts because I found the bar graphs, even if I added a trend line, just didn't, it was visually cluttered. So so overall, the charts that you'll find in your packet are the percentage of students with disabilities at the particular grade or subject compared with the percentage of students with disabilities at the state level. So this is that same special population, so it's apples to apples. And in general, we're on pretty consistent with the trends. When I added the trend lines in, I was like, I'm just going to make this a line graph. So that's not how this data should really be presented, but visually it made more sense. So yeah, I felt in that apples to apples comparison, I felt like we were in pretty good standing. It was almost identical to the state or trending in to our favor. But when comparing students with disabilities to students without disabilities in Hatfield, we are still seeing that converse trend in some areas, which I didn't include in this, but it's available on the state website. So overall, ELA for grades 3 through 8, we had 54 students with disabilities and 130 non-disabled students take the MCAS. And so we did find that we have, again, like Ms. Petra indicated, the state had a lot of not meeting. So the state had 46% of students with disabilities not meeting expectations, whereas we had 28%, but only 2% with not disabilities. Again, the other trends were similar for ELA, for math. I kind of did it separate for ELA and then math. Very similar trends between Hatfield or the state or benefiting us. And again, the state had much more percentage of students with disabilities that did not meet compared to Hatfield. Ours is about half as much. And yeah, I guess that's my fast summary. Anybody have questions? I could go on forever.
I think your explanations were helpful. So
And a lot of it we got to digest before we got here.
totally.
So that helps a lot. Thank you. Before we close out a discussion on MCAS, is there anything else you want to cover? Go math curriculum. And kudos to some ELA work that's clearly happening. Okay, with that, we're going to go jump back on our agenda, following along at home. I think we'd like to table the budget subcommittee report. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay. And so we're going to go on to the policy subcommittee. Has two pieces in front of us this evening.
Sure thing. So the first policy to discuss is the disposal of property policy.
This is the
And-
first reading.
Yes.
Are you looking for 3 readings for the disposal of property?
The only, I mean, the only thing is we would like to get rid of.
We have some things
We
to
have
do.
things to get rid of. If the committee is fine, since we don't have a policy here, if we honor the essence of the policy and getting rid of the books, for example, and we have some technology also, that we've essentially followed the steps of this, that would be great if you would authorize or with your blessing, let us do that so that we can free up some space.
I'm going to still go back to let's
I don't
table
think
that
the-
for a second.
I don't think the policy committee had a strong opinion on the number of readings.
Okay.
That's well said.
So,
In fairness, it's a brand new policy to us. It's not something that we updated, so we didn't want to,
just come
Rush
in with
it.
one through.
right?
Okay.
We wanted people to have time to consider it.
So let's consider it tonight. We can talk about what the school can do in the meantime, and then let's see it come back at least one more time, unless there's a lot of conversation.
That
Okay.
sounds reasonable to me.
Okay.
Is there any feedback on it?
I thought it looked good and consistent in what I've seen.
I would have 2 very small edits. And the last piece, when it gets into disposal of surplus items, I'm not sure it benefits us to say junked or scrapped. The items may be disposed of. It just, it has a
Fair.
tone. I also would put the reuse and recycling is strongly encouraged to the top of the list. Just start with that idea. Just small.
I thought
But
it was.
but I didn't have an issue with the estimated values. That all made sense.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Adam, anything? Okay.
Okay. So the next policy, this is a first reading. We have some edits to the district personnel policy.
It's actually 2.
And yeah, it is. It's the staff, it's GDC, staff leaves and absences, and GDD, support staff vacations and holidays. So we did add in the wording to the title in our edits to clarify that this is for non-union and non-contract staff. So staff who are not part of a collective bargaining agreement and staff who do not have a specially negotiated contract. So, this is the first reading. We are open. A lot of the edits that we made were in terms of style, but notably in the leaves and absences, we are submitting an increase in the days of sick leave. And we clarified the holidays. I love a table. So we were clarifying the tables and cleaning up our wording around vacations.
I think I missed the clarification so this is non-union, non-contract.
Yes.
Is that now written in here?
On just the heading.
Nobody is looking at
Oh,
your copy.
no.
So the copy that came out
Yeah.
didn't.
Okay.
This is the
That was the
copy.
latest copy that I had.
You,
I clicked the link in the agenda. You know what? Mine might look different since I was helping
Right,
make the
because-
edits for the.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. I looked at it on mine and it looked
right,
perfect.
because,
That's
because
okay.
you're the author and
looked
you have all the
perfect.
You have
edits.
all
So-
the edits.
So
See, because yours has it there.
Is-
Maybe because it might
I don't
have to do with
know.
the permissions. I'm so sorry.
So
So it let me pull it. It just didn't. I
See,
didn't see.
this is, here's.
expand on it. It
I'm
came up
sorry,
for me.
guys. I think this happened before and I checked it and I was like, oh, it looks
So
perfect.
this has
Oh, yeah.
all our edits that what you
This-
printed
this
there does
isn't-
not.
So let's
So
try
can
again.
we table this
Yeah,
one?
I would love to table this.
Is there
and
anything
try
that this
again.
will
No.
throw a monkey wrench in?
Not at all.
Excellent. Okay.
They're all positive changes anyway.
Do you want to speak to the
Let's-
rationale of why we made those adjustments and changes, or that it would more mirror what other employees are
In
receiving
the union
from
contract
the contracts?
Yep.
So we updated it to reflect that
Makes a lot
for
of sense.
equity purposes.
That makes sense. And now that you have the call out, that makes sense.
I'm super sorry.
It's okay. I went back and I was like, I pulled out my contract. I was going to double check some stuff.
Yeah. So those were really the bulk of the changes.
And GDD catches up to the calendar, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it does.
Okay. So both of those,
And you wouldn't have seen any of those beautiful edits, so we'll bring them next time.
we'll see them in December.
Yeah.
Maybe we can have a clean copy and the edited.
Yeah.
With all the edits.
We'll try to
shown.
do both.
We'll do
Yeah,
both
this is
so
the
people
first
can see
reading,
the
yeah.
changes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And it is really, I love that you guys are putting this stuff into like, so you can see it in red.
Mhm.
It wasn't always the case. So
I got you.
I'm loving that part. So fast. Okay. So policy subcommittee all checked in.
Nothing further.
So can I just go back to the disposal? Is the committee okay with us moving forward and disposing of books and technology in accordance with the reading of the policy?
Any issues?
I think there's consensus.
Okay,
Great, thank you so much.
fine. Oh,
Mike will be very happy.
Yes, you will. So will Ben.
falling underneath stuff.
Mm.
Okay, that now catches us up to item number 10, the district improvement plan. And so tonight is presentation and a vote for a long time coming on our district improvement
But I
plan.
will say it is a beautiful document.
It's getting there. It's getting there. So I would really like to entertain some discussion before we get to a vote on this. There are probably a few things we might want to look at to fill in. And I just want to make sure everybody has had an opportunity for that before we put it up to vote. So I think we all have a hard copy.
Just a point of order.
Sure.
Generally, you're supposed to put a motion on the floor first and then discuss, as opposed to just, we've been doing it kind of
Yes.
different places, different
We-
ways.
Our previous Robert's Rules review said so long as we had said that that's what we're going to do, we could do because we're a small group. But if you want to put a motion on the floor, we can do that.
I think if there's any changes, additions, corrections that we want to do, then it would make kind of sense to do it in the discussion and then vote on the
Finished draft.
finished,
It'll just be
because we're still,
clearer. So,
because then any motion would have to go back and,
Unless
Add
it
in the
says
amendments,
as
yeah.
amended.
are we all confused now? So I think for tonight, we're just going to use small group rules and we'll have some discussion. And if anyone wants to call me out on that, I will take the complaint. So looking through some of the changes since we looked at this last, we just did a simple reordering because I don't think our intent that goals had priorities, but certainly they might be seen to have prioritization by their order on the list. And so we just put our reaching for excellence up to the front. That sort of feels like the right place for that. This calls out those sort of three fundamental areas: academic, emotional intelligence, and social pragmatics that we have been speaking to. This was the piece that had the most change because we had, administration took this and took our edits and came back. And so because this is the place where there have been the most edits, I really wanted to focus the conversation here. So chiefly before we vote on this, I would really like to see dates for implementation added to this. So my intent is once we have this approved is to take all those dates and to go back to our master calendar and plot that in so that we're just having a visual to what we said is important so that we can keep coming back to that. And right now we just hadn't gotten to either when they start or whether they're finished, or there's a lot of different ways we have factored in implementation dates for tactics. So administration, do you guys want to lead giving us some dates to fill in here?
Well, as you kind of heard, much of this is work where we've already started in terms of almost all of the things listed under tactics. Work has started. Again, finished is a little bit harder to talk about. I think what we're always prepared to do is check-ins to see, progress to date. So I think the finish part is a little harder to do on the fly. I think I need to have a little more conversation, but we have started, we are monitoring student progress. We're designing rubrics or have rubrics in mind. We're beginning to do the review of the curriculum for currency. That's work that is ongoing. We're doing the PD. We're training teachers in SEL. We're teaching students. So that work has already started. There really isn't an end date to some of these. These are going to be ongoing in terms of what they're doing. And what we'll need to do is, in terms of the objectives, obviously report out when that data becomes available. So for example, we'll have iReady math data in January. So that's a reporting period. It's not finished, but
those are the dates I'm fine capturing that.
Yep.
So in some of the other goals, we had things like defined by March for the following year's offering, so that there's a target date that we can track stuff to. And I think that's what the committee is looking for coming in to this third goal.
Right.
So that, if it's providing PD, that's an annual thing. What's the day by which we're saying this is the PD plan? And if there's a budget component to that, that probably needs to happen by March. So those are the things that this level of document can help us track so that we don't come back and find that, oh, we could have done this really cool thing if we'd thought about it 3 months ago when we were planning on funding for whatever.
Right.
And now we could do it, we better go find a grant. We should still look for the grant. But,
right.
So I'm still.
Yeah, and I think just looking at the tactics, like we can see that some of these, it's not like they have end dates. Right. So I think by implementation, what would be helpful for me to know would be like our up and running date, like when is this like student
Yep.
progress plan up and running? And now we can ask about it, or we can go back to the data or.
Yep. And some of them feel very fine, so like identifying age appropriate screeners for SEL, like that's a check mark. When it's checked, it's checked.
Right.
And I think we also don't want all of this stuff to be like, okay, it's November of 22. Like they shouldn't all say November, and they can't all say, June 2025. So
Yeah, spread it out.
spread some love.
Right.
Yeah,
As I say, I do think they are going to say all of these have started because that's part of how we developed it. It's work we're doing, either because of the DIPs, the school DIPs that we're working on. But the end dates or check-in dates or the check-off dates because it's done, we can get more specific on it. I can get those dates.
I think that's what I'm looking for.
Yep.
And anything that's annual, that it has a check-in annual date.
Right.
So, leveraging teacher feedback through surveys feels like it has a check-in date.
Right.
Doesn't happen once. So what is realistic in terms of getting a mindful review of what those dates look like?
We're meeting tomorrow.
Okay.
Does that mean so I can get them back out to you?
Okay. Committee, other things?
So can I just ask for some clarification on the tactics? I love this, Reach for Excellence goal. I love how it's broken down into sections. I think the objectives are great. The strategies are great. But just to kind of loop back to what Superintendent Wood was saying, are these tactics all things that we are already doing? Okay.
For the most part.
Kind of.
There are a few things.
Or extensions of things.
Or
that we've already
extensions, yeah.
started. Like I'm
Okay.
looking at the rubric design for project-based and collaborative instruction. We've done a lot of work on collaborative instruction. We haven't designed specific rubrics for like positive interdependence or individual accountability within those things. So those could be extensions of work that we're already doing.
And I think a primary piece is fidelity. So for instance, holding routine data meetings, that has been restarted work that Melissa's been doing and Connor's been doing. And that's not something you can just do for a couple months and then stop, right? Like, and each time you do it, you're getting deeper and deeper and deeper. So I think fidelity and depth and that's the piece that I hear what you're saying, Christy, on that there's pieces of this that have some timelines related to the budget or that, our PD days are set aside, those kind of things. And then we have, these broad things. I mean, ask a teacher to get down to a broken, take any skill, we can break it down to the minutia, right? So, but I do recognize what you're saying. So I'm thinking about, I do a lot of project management with like the pyramid model when we have an outside consultant, and I know Melissa does too, around setting those short-term goals or long-term goals, and I kind of see it in like a Gantt chart, model. So I hear what you're saying, but I think we do need to unpack it one more time timeline-wise, because I think in looking at this, our initial thought was ongoing. These are all ongoing, but they're ongoing in different ways. And I hear that might be something that you want more clarification on.
And we're open to looking at it different ways, but I think the committee can serve you better if we have some sense of when we get to ask or when we should look or when we should be asking. Because I think when we map that out, we have the next 3 years where everybody's like, okay, we kind of like have a game plan that gets tied to a timeline of sorts.
Is it, in looking at the other two goals, and Michael just kick me from way down there if I'm talking out of turn, sorry. But I've been trying to wrap my head around this and I geek out on a good chart. So the other goals don't have sort of, I don't want to say sub dates, but I'm wondering in terms of implementation timeline, particularly that front page, Do you have any concern if we broke it down in terms of budget annually, November, data meetings, this, that, and that, like having more than one time within that slot? Is that okay?
Sure.
All right.
I mean, I think it's at some point it's there to be helpful.
Right.
Because what I don't want to do is, having spent how many hours all of us collectively put into doing this, for it to then just sit, because that's like a real waste. And if we don't have a way to keep track of it, and this is the last piece that makes it easy to track, then it just sits. So whatever dates become meaningful, add that in. But find a way so that we're just thoughtful about what's coming up, so we're not missing something because we didn't look for it. And there are going to be some ongoings. Kathy and I put dates on the other two goals, and there were some we got down to, we're like, there's never a time we're not doing that, right? There's never a time we're not going to build relationships with the community. Just,
Yeah, at the same time, for me, I think, for all the reasons Christy said, but just additionally for me, having, some reporting dates or whatever valid dates are in there for the tactics, it does sort of help me visualize how these tactics are actually supporting, like, ultimately reaching the objectives and the goal, right? Rather than, like, if it was just a whole page of ongoing, I'd be like, well, I don't know, we're already doing it, we hope we reach it.
One
harder to
piece
see.
visually, Christy, that I'm curious about. I love the color coding, like go purple marketing, love it. But with the different, it feels like these are under it still, and I know that they're not necessarily.
so you want the date under the tactic?
No,
Is that
I'm
the
saying,
part that's-
sorry, the color. So like this is like a deeper lavender, lighter lavender. It feels like this is only for this, whereas these things actually, do you know what I mean? Like the tactics are.
Well,
there.
I think the tactics are there to support that specific strategy. It's not that they don't also support some of the other stuff.
Okay.
But I think it's a matter of saying, okay, how are we going to get to maintaining high academic expectations? These are the core things.
Okay.
Ultimately, I think all three of these goals and every tactic all blend together
Right.
really nicely, because there's some of this stuff you can't do one without the other. I mean, I think we all know, we just talked about MCAS scores. If somebody's having a bad day, it's like, well, what are we doing to make sure they're having a good day? Well, here's all this stuff we're doing. Like, they're very interwoven.
Okay.
And I just felt like once we finally got to the final one, it was a little too rainbow, that it needed to kind of get final, so it's not quite as rainbow as it used to be. Are there changes to strategy language? I feel like the goal language we probably all agreed to a few meetings ago. Strategy language, is there any, at least on two of these, the back two, we probably have had a lot of conversation about that. I want to make sure that everybody's on board. Are there any changes you want to make there?
I had a question about the second objective, improve K through 8 math scores by 1.5 grade levels on iReady Math, Dibbles, and K5 SRSD writing. So is it supposed to say K through 8 math scores just by 1.15? Because
I had some questions on that too.
and then I just wanted you to explain that, and it's kind of good timing because we just looked at MCAS data. So now I'm like switching over to grade levels, and I'm just trying to understand that measurement system and what it means.
I'm sorry, where are you?
So on page
page?
1 in the objective,
Oh.
so the second bullet in the objective of page 1.
Actually, I'm going to jump on your question, Jen, by asking if improve K through 8 math scores by all those things and K through 5 writing scores. If we add
Are those
scores,
two
is
things?
that two sets of scores that we are trying to improve? Or is it just the math scores by all of those methods following? Do you see that?
Yes.
Right.
And the SRSD doesn't have anything to do with the math.
Math.
It's
I
its own
didn't
right
think
Yeah.
so, but I'm not the educator.
Right, there should be a
Right.
comma.
So-
Yeah.
Right.
So
DRA could have been added into that as well, because that's yet another assessment tool that we use 3 times a year that we do hope to see improvement in.
Right.
Right.
So,
Which doesn't necessarily use grade
So
levels.
the
So are we looking for,
K5
for growth in 1.5 grade levels across ELA, math,
We should differentiate.
and writing? And then what is that? What does 1.5 grade mean?
It's just because each one scores slightly differently, we're going to have to kind of do a crosswalk in terms of how to look at that, because they're different assessments. We'll put in language, edit that language to say improve reading skills and improve writing as well.
And-
I'm wondering if, because we're having ongoing talks, like Connor just said, we're adding in the iReady reading.
Right.
Or ELA. And I mean, because this is a 3-year plan, based on like this initial level of data that we have, we might identify like, oh, we actually need a supplement, data resource. I'm guess my question is was there, because I know in Michael's office, there's a list on his whiteboard of 6,200 benchmarking we either use or want to use or whatever, that we came up with during leadership. Could we just keep it broad in that we'll improve probably K to 10, or if we're trying to focus on MCAS years, or something, based on in all academic areas, based on frequent benchmarking, and then like such as this, and this, because
Yeah.
in 2 years from now, we might have something else. And I'm just wondering, are people really set on putting this exact language here? Because we'll have a supplemental like assessment calendar that we, create based on what we're using it. And
I think to the conversations that we've had before, these are what we're using now.
Yeah.
So we might as well codify that
Mhm.
and say we're doing it. The 1.5 was kind of a stretch number because, in looking at least in the initial data, that would pull us, we're talking about a grade level. So we want to get kids out of red, hopefully out of yellow, into green. And that's going to be, at least 1.5 years. So I'd like to leave the names in there for now. It doesn't mean we can't add to them and report back saying, we've now added K through 10 ELA. So we will have a new tool to report out how growth is happening. But we should just distinguish that we're looking at all 3 core areas, content. And the 1.5 is just some measurable number that we can point to and work toward.
And is my question on that line, we all had questions on one line, is that 1.5 grade levels over the course of 3 years? Or
No,
is there
annually.
year-on-year improvement
I would say
annually?
annually.
Okay.
And that's the average. So I'm sorry, I still don't get it. So if you're looking at, grade 1, their average score for where they fell in their dibbles, and let's say they fell in the red, 1.5. So in a year, 1.5 grade levels is saying we want to get them almost to the green. Is that what 1.5
Like
means?
if you were in first
they'd
grade
be,
now, you're
they'd be in
2.5
yellow
grade.
still, possibly even red, depending upon where they.
But that's
but
that,
yes. But
that
then-
is that needle that we're trying to move, and it's based on grade level averages per those
Correct.
program assessments.
Right.
And is that like if a community member is looking at the dip, they have that, they're able to look at that, or they're not, right? Like how?
I think we would be coming back in
We'd be coming
meetings
back and
and
reporting
saying, here's our benchmark for X,
Okay.
Y, and Z that goes back to the dip.
Mhm.
And so my intention is that on our monthly meetings, we're going to have a check-in related to this plan every month And one month might be a benchmark on one piece, and the next month might be related to something else, but that we would be seeing those benchmarks come back 2 to 3 times a year, depending on what it is, right?
Right.
And then do we have an idea of how that would potentially translate into MCAS data?
They do line up. Well, I'm thinking specifically with the iReady.
Yeah.
It's not designed to be a predictor, but functionally it kind of is.
Okay.
It's sort of broken out the same way too, related to the different skills and different.
The subcategories of math
Thank you,
itself.
subcategories.
I got you.
That's the word I was looking for.
Okay. All right.
So this is specific to math scores, and then we'll make a second bullet specific to,
Reading and a separate bullet to writing.
okay.
With them all being 1.5 grade levels?
Or
Good question.
I would
think
hope
it's a
that
stretch.
math probably needs the stretch.
Right.
Math has opportunity. Let's put it that way.
I mean, to be honest, because it's hard with the SRSD data because it's not reported out in grade level.
Right.
So like I said, we need some kind of crosswalk to figure that out. But it's something everybody understands, right? To say 1.5 grade levels.
Except that if we're doing the benchmarking, and this is for us to review, if you have a metric that you have data so that we can look at it, we are not trying to reinterpret it, I think that would be okay. I don't know.
Yeah, we can put the specific benchmark.
I don't know what SRS looks like. I don't know what that metric looks like.
It's a rubric score,
Correct.
so
And it's different depending upon the grade.
Grade level.
Scores, right. Even better, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. So it's not the same point value. The pre-assessment and post-assessment do not have the same point value at each and every grade level.
so we can look
Percentage
at that.
increase,
We can look at
Yeah,
some
we could do a percentage increase for
Yeah.
sure.
something
Yes.
Right.
easy, concrete,
Yeah.
Yes.
trackable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Percentage increase is great.
Right.
Plus, like if this is something for the community, like, I mean, I know what 1.5 grade levels is, but maybe
Right.
not, you know,
But if something doesn't map out to grade levels,
right.
then something that
So
is digestible.
Right.
Using vocal data and surveying the grades feel like binary things as opposed to, are we looking for those baselines to have year-on-year growth? Like what are we measuring in those last 2 bullet points?
So again, because it's baseline data, I think next year we'll be able to tell you what the growth would be for the following year. But I don't have it enough to be able to tell you what it should be now.
So we can speak to year-on-year growth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what it would be. Yeah, it's not going to be within a
So
year.
I wanna make sure we say
Yep,
that.
yep.
Connor, did you have a different?
No, I was
idea?
just going to say that I think that, that to me, the way those are worded feel like a this year piece versus if this is a 3-year goal, maybe we could reword it to be 3 years long.
So the objective is going to get some fine tuning. The implementation is going to get some fine tuning.
I had something about the middle strategy, about deliver aligned curriculum. When I'm looking underneath at the tactics, most of the tactics reference PD, and I just thought it might be nice to include PD in that heading for the strategy.
Sort of as a
I mean,
oh,
in our workshops in our last draft, we were questioning of having a strategy for PD and where was it going to fall, under which goal. And we lost it as a strategy, but we kept all the tactics. So I'm just wondering if we can kind of incorporate PD somehow into that heading.
in a way, it feels like we're more overtly calling out support to our teaching staff too. Like it feels like a commitment to them and an investment in them in doing that.
I also had a comment kind of in that section, just if we, and I'm sure that you're planning on doing this, but we had provide resources and trainings to teachers and staff when new materials are purchased, but I was wondering if it made sense to put in planning for when we're onboarding new teachers. Because like with iReady Math right now, we're in this huge, right, onboarding and training. And I worry in our district with what can happen from year to year if we're bringing in, maybe we'll have to bring in one new teacher next year, maybe.
95% retention.
But then what is,
No, that's a good point.
Yeah, I would just caution the committee in understanding that when you develop these plans, not every detail of every tactic or strategy needs to be included here. Some are some basic understanding and principles of work that the schools will do, right? I mean, when you write a lesson plan, you don't write every detail of everything you're going to do in terms of making it happen. But the big picture, we know that when we have new teachers, we have to do some training for them. That's a basic principle of good practice. But we hear you, and we can certainly put it in there. To your point, Kathy, I mean, I don't. Again, the big picture is to align the curriculum. That is the strategy, and these are the steps to get there. To me, we're not trying to. Our strategy isn't to design the PD. That's our tactic, and within the tactic, we're going to design the PD. But what we really need is aligned curriculum, so that we got K to 10 pulling together in one direction and doing that. I mean, I don't mind putting it there. I really don't. But I'm just trying to articulate the difference there. That PD is a big piece of that.
I'm not hearing you ask to remove what's there.
No, I'm not either.
Okay.
I'm not either.
Sure.
I'm trying to make the distinction. The big picture strategy that I want to see accomplished is that we actually have aligned curriculum. That's the big idea to me that Hatfield needs and needs to be able to articulate, and our teachers need to have time together to do that. I was observing the PD day and heard the teachers at HES doing the math conversation, and it was just so wonderful to hear teachers talking to teachers about teaching, right? So that's aligning our curriculum because they were all getting together around the same practice. It was the PD design to make that happen that Melissa did. So, but the big idea is we need aligned curriculum.
Okay.
Can I ask just a visual question? I'm not sure. In the strategies where in each one, the all in all students is underlined and italicized. And I think everyone agrees that it should be the case for all students. I'm wondering if anyone else sort of had, when they saw that, had the idea that there was an implication that it currently was not for all students.
That's how it came into us on this last edit. So I left it alone.
And that was what the teacher feedback, remember when I did that,
Yeah.
That thing, they were really wanted to
pushed
say
it to
all.
Okay. Yeah.
So
That's interesting.
I'm not reading it that way. I saw that it was really pointing out the inclusivity of it.
Okay. All right.
But I hear what you're saying,
Yeah.
but that was the background of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there are any words. I know there's no other words necessarily underlined or italicized. There's nothing on here that says that we're not doing any of this. It's just, it's all about making sure it's public, it's talked about, it's watched, and it's measurable. So, I think it is underlined and italicized because we do want to make sure that we're doing it all the time, right? I mean, that's part of aligned curriculum too. I mean, we've got to do it all the time. There aren't some classes we can do it with and others we can't. There aren't some kids we can have good practices for and others, it doesn't matter. So it's all kids all the time. And all teachers all the time. Maybe there are other places we can underline all too. I don't know. So we're consistent. I don't know. Should we look?
On all the pages.
Yeah.
I just asked a question about, on the first page, page 1, underneath, deliver aligned curriculum with high expectations for all students. The first tactic, what exactly does review curriculum on a cycle for currency mean? What do we mean when we're saying currency?
It's current. It's based on the standards.
All right, and that's, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. On
And,
it being
and then
a-
again, everybody
got
is
it.
following it to fidelity,
Gotcha.
right? So that we don't have teachers choosing that the resources, if we're giving them iReady, we don't want to walk into classrooms and see them using Success for All, or whatever math program is out there today.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Are there other changes? So we're looking growing enrollment.
Question on grow enrollment. It says enroll a minimum at each school of 10 new students in 22-23. We're already in that school year. Does it make sense to have that there?
3-year plan.
Okay.
Why?
I did originally have it stretch out to 24, 25, 26, and I said, I don't know. I don't think the committee wants to go up that far.
Everything else starts this
But
We're
we
walking
can look
along.
at that data. I mean, we can look at that data, see how many we did enroll, see how we did.
Super picky. But in on page 2 in market and communicate, create a buzz. Just it has a connotation to me that seems ingenuous. So I'm wondering if we did like highlight 2 to 3 key attributes of the experience.
Although I think the goal there is, I don't have a problem changing the language, and I'm glad to catch that if that's how that feels. But I think it's about the outcome of the highlighting, not just the doing of the highlighting. It's about trying to get some positive communication and positive word of mouth going about key attributes, not just that we're saying it, but that we're actually getting it to where people are engaged on that and talking about it. So we can come up with a different way to say that, but I guess I would like to see it still be about the outcome, not just
Create interest. Is that better to you, Jen?
our
Positive,
positive
interest or?
perception.
Huh? I can say.
Positive.
Yeah, can we have, in the objective for grow enrollment, we have retain 95% of enrolled students year to year in grades. Can we say pre-K rather than K? We do have pre-K. We never want to forget
But you-
pre-K.
You can't
Love
retain. I guess you can retain.
We do have student, I mean, don't.
Yes,
That
we do
transition
retain.
kindergarten,
Yeah.
right.
In some, I mean.
Yep. Absolutely.
Whether it's your second year of pre-K or into kindergarten. Yeah.
Right.
Positive social something.
You want more than interest.
I understand I understand your perspective on that. I don't know. It seems.
Okay, so if you want a different outcome, then let's talk about what the different outcomes we're looking for might be. Or if we're talking about how we speak about what the outcome we're looking for. Like, I'm just making sure I'm looking for a better way to say something, but if you're like, don't say that, that's a different conversation. Is that? So I'm just trying to make sure I understand.
Promote conversation. Promote our schools.
Promote positive conversation about 2 to 3 key attributes.
What did you just say that again?
Promote positive conversation.
Well, it already says within a broadly positive perception. So we're already
Okay, we're already
saying
positive.
We're already positive.
I'm like, because we could promote some conversation.
I
Would
know.
not necessarily be a good thing, depending. Promote conversation about 2 to 3 key attributes of the Hatfield Public School experience within a broadly positive perception of the district.
Promote conversation highlighting 2 to 3.
I think the is that there's a benefit to be known for something because you kind of have an ownable place in the market, which is in our case the valley of schools. It's not just public schools, it's all schools, right? So it's, what are we known for? I mean, right now I think we're known for small class sizes, you know, known for good language arts skills. People are looking at test scores. What else do you think we're known for?
Listen to the radio ad on the country music station. Our AP classes,
Outputs, college placements,
college
Placement.
athletics, clubs.
But
community involvement. It's, I mean, there's a lot.
yeah, and ideally we find stuff that's kind of unique, and some those key pieces are things that not everybody does.
I mean, if everybody else is happy with Create a Buzz, then that's absolutely fine with me. I don't want to. It's absolutely fine.
Jen, I'm so used to marketing speak creating a friction for people. So. I'm happy to make that change.
Spread the word. I mean, can it just be that?
Yeah. Anything else on the Grow enrollment sheet? Any implementation dates set in panic?
No.
And nurture an invested community.
On the last objective there, do we want to change paras to ESPs?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Good catch. So one of the things that as we look to grow year over year on some of the stuff will mean that it needs to be measured in some way. So I don't know what metrics we have in place to like get a head count on how many seats got filled at the band concert. But things like that, if we're looking to grow, we need to, I don't know if those get counted today.
No, but a community clicker, yeah. You have somebody earn some hours.
Yeah.
And standing at the door and click.
Or give everybody a ticket to a raffle. I mean, there's lots of ways you can count. Okay. Anything else in there?
True.
Take a picture.
There's
Yeah.
the largest crowd.
Yeah, just some way to measure.
Christy, the objective around growing the number of volunteer engagements year on year, I had to think about it for a second and then realized it was for the community to come into the schools, right? I don't know if there's a way to say that. When I just read it the first time, I didn't pick up on which direction that was, because we have student interns, we have all sorts of,
So just like a community
Directions.
volunteer engagement?
yeah,
Just
something like that,
clarifying.
maybe, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I like that. If we give out raffle tickets when they come in, we get a count, and then their prize is some type of Hatfield swag. So then
There
when
you
they
go.
leave, they're doing the actual marketing for us.
Love it, love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Good idea.
Small investment.
Vintage soccer shorts that are the right colors, right?
Yeah, they can each leave with a little piece of the carpet square from Smith Academy.
There you
I'm
go.
telling you, orange carpet auction.
Or
It's
that
gonna be big.
green.
Either one.
If it was one of the visiting teams that wins the raffle.
Congratulations.
Okay. So we have some edits to make.
Just seeing it in print, do we want to, because I'm trying to picture this on a website, do we want to just,
We may need to
Align
look
the colors?
different. So
Okay.
right now they alternate depending on,
there is a purpose to it.
there
Okay,
is,
Okay,
sorry.
no,
But we can find, I think when this moves to the website, we may need to find some
okay,
other ways to help it be clear.
it'll probably have to be a PDF.
And not all it may not be that every tactic needs to show. Maybe
Oh,
somebody
okay.
has to click through to
Mhm.
learn more.
Mhm.
So. How are we feeling about voting on something that still needs some edits versus getting the edits made?
Well, I think we've really hammered in the goals and the strategies and the objectives. So the edits aren't making any
Something.
Directional.
Nope.
content changes that I'm okay with voting on this tonight, knowing that the edits that we're making are just
And that they're coming
cosmetic.
short term.
Yeah.
Okay.
Other than dates, but I will trust the administration to come up with dates and timelines for that first goal that makes sense to them. So having said that, I'll make a motion to approve the district improvement plan for 2022 to 2025.
Second?
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I appreciate everyone's work on this. Everybody took a lot of time and effort. So yeah, we have a plan. I mentioned to Kathy, this will make the next school chair's job so easy.
You're looking my way.
So, okay, not much left. We talked about the school trip to Guatemala, and next up, the school trip to DC, which is looking for a vote tonight as well.
So this is the 8th grade trip to Washington, DC that we're trying to bring back this year. There's been a hiatus for the last 3 years because of COVID, where it hasn't been done. We solicited bids from a couple of different vendors. The best bid that we got was actually from the vendor that we've gone through in the past, through First Choice Tours, based right in Deerfield. So a couple of things is the itinerary. Everyone has the itinerary. One piece that's not on here, which we're trying to do, and I'm not sure if it would add an extra cost or not, was a visit to the Capitol building, which would be wonderful if we can make that happen. There's a chunk of time where we're at the Smithsonian's for 7 hours, which we would hopefully be able to do a couple hours at the Capitol building before we're able to do that. Just trying to work that into the schedule. The other change that for this year, and I want to be clear, it's just for this year that we're looking to do, is to extend the invitation to participate in this trip beyond 8th grade. It's traditionally an 8th grade trip. the eighth graders for the last 3 years have not had a chance to participate in this trip, which it's a pretty valuable experience for anyone, I think, to go to the nation's capital and see what it's like, as well as it aligns to the curriculum. The eighth grade is civics-based social studies. Ninth and 10th grade are U.S. history 1 and 2, and so it aligns there as well. So that's part of it, is to give those students in 9th through 11th grade, all those students who are in grades that would have gone but didn't get the chance to, the opportunity to participate. The other piece of that is that right now we currently have 21 8th grade students who have said yes, that they would like to go, or their families have said yes that they would like to go. The minimum number that we were quoted for is 25. So we also don't have the number that we would need to, they would likely still go, but it would be more expensive. That would push it even higher for those students. So currently we have 21 students in 8th grade who have said that they would like to go, whose parents have indicated that is the case. 5 have said that they might want to go, they might not, they're not sure, maybes. And only 3 have said no, that they don't want to attend. So it's a pretty high level of participation. We've had 12 9th and 12 10th graders, so 24 total, indicate that they would be interested, and 5 11th graders that have expressed that they would be interested. So that's actually a higher number than earlier today, which I looked back at the survey, found. So right now we have a total of 50 students, which would equate to 5 chaperones that would be able to go as well. So the way it would work is we group students by grade level on the trip. So they'd be in grade level groups during the tours. They'd be rooming with other students who were in their grade levels. We might have to combine like a couple, like a 11th grader with a group of 12, with a group of 10th graders, that kind of thing. But by and large, that's what we would shoot to do. Similar to kind of how it's been done in the Philadelphia, or the band trip that goes every year, where there's mixed middle high school groups as well. Yeah, I'm not going to walk through the entire itinerary, but everyone has it. It's a trip down through Philadelphia, bus trip, coach trip. There's security at the building every night, and a whole host of.
No, I was just walking away without his coat.
Oh, can't do that. And just a whole host of just wonderful activities throughout the trip.
Did I see the cost in there?
Yeah, it's at the on the last page of the itinerary. So it's based on the number of students. So right now, at the current level, who have indicated that they would like to go, it would likely be $719 per student for quad for quad rooms, which is more expensive. Last time the trip ran, I think it was in the it was like $550 per student. So it's a relatively significant increase. This is about $200 cheaper than the next nearest bid that we could find, as well as the trip seemed more. There's a lot more stuff that they're doing, and it includes a lot of things with it.
Gas prices, food prices.
Yeah, everything's
hotel
gone
pri-
up. Yeah, so
I'm
we're
surprised that's all. It's
yeah.
In the past, when it was just the 8th grade trip, they started fundraising when they were 7th graders,
Mhm.
like with homecoming, other fundraisers they were doing to help offset costs for the 8th grade trip. Because you're kind of pulling this together last minute, I'm assuming that none of the grades have really done any fundraising, and especially earmarked for this trip.
So they have done fundraising. It's not they haven't done it as we're fundraising for the 8th grade DC trip, but they have done fundraising both as 7th graders and now as 8th graders. They've done the what is that, butter braid? Is that
Yes.
they've done those. They've done the homecoming, those
Concession
fundraisers.
stand, yeah.
Yep, the concessions. So they've done some fundraising, and that could be used to offset the cost. It's
And how would that then work with, so the 8th graders fundraised, 7th and 8th grade, and they might have money to put towards that. But now opening it up to the other grades, does that mean different grades might be paying different prices? So,
Yeah.
the 10th graders, whatever money they've fundraised from the homecoming concessions or anything else they've done, maybe they're offsetting by X amount, but the 8th graders are offsetting by Y amount.
Yeah, I haven't thought that all the way through.
Because it wouldn't be really fair if the 8th graders had a ton of money that they've fundraised.
right, to use it for.
But the 9th
grades, yeah.
graders have no money, and, I think that's
Yeah.
something you need to consider about.
It's certainly something I will consider. Like I said, I haven't thought through that piece of it yet.
It might be a little tricky for, figuring out,
Who owes what? Yeah.
yeah.
Is there any feedback from 8th grade parents?
The only feedback I've got has been positive about opening it up, and it's been from 8th grade students who have siblings in other grades that they would like to go as well. Likewise, the staff, I surveyed the staff to see how they felt about opening it up. And the overwhelming majority of staff thought it was a good idea to open it up to the students who had missed out as well.
Would everybody fit on one bus?
We're close. So right now, if everyone who has indicated that they would like to go goes, which is 50, and we have 5 chaperones, that's 55, and the bus capacity is 56, and it's a coach bus. So we're at 1.
Really?
So if we get the approval, what I'd like to do is I would open it to 8th grade first for a certain amount of time. Say this is an 8th grade trip. If you would like to go, you have to pay the deposit by this date and confirm your spot. And then after that, open it to 9th through 11th grade on a we're opening it up. It's first come first served basis. We have X number of spots because I don't think 2 buses is in the cards for us because that would actually increase the cost then rather than decrease it, which is kind of the opposite of what we're going for. And I don't think there's a second bus. I think they said we have 1 bus that we can do, and that's we can get it for on these dates.
What about students who would be interested in going, but financially it would be too difficult for their family?
Yep. So we have funds set aside for that could be used. That we have donation funds from actually last year's senior class that were kind of earmarked for that kind of purpose. And we also there are funds that are there for that. And so we would work with those families to make sure that they could go. We would also hope that if there were fundraising opportunities to get involved and do fundraisers, that they would get involved with those fundraisers too, to help offset the cost.
And this doesn't conflict with potentially a band trip. It's
No.
right after the Guatemala trip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which may be one of the reasons we only have 5 11th graders who have expressed interest. It doesn't conflict with the band trip. It's a different time. There may be some care between what they do in Philadelphia when they do the stopover here. But we could look at the itineraries, make sure that they're different enough that there's not, that they're not duplicating what's done.
And this doesn't affect MCAS testing in May.
No, we'd be able to work around it.
Okay.
Yeah, the way that they do MCAS now, the window is so long, and it's all computer based, so you can have everyone do it around it. Absolutely.
It's a beautiful time to visit the city.
Mm.
It's really like
It's
the
a
nicest
really
time to
nice
visit.
cherry blossom.
I want to go. Should vote me into the trail.
They have 1 spot left.
You can chaperone. One
To
spot,
be a chaperone.
seat 56.
There. Okay. Would anybody like to put this up for a vote?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the trip to Washington, D.C. as presented.
Second.
Any further conversation?
And the plan is for the following year that it will go back to strictly 8th grade trip?
Yes, yeah, this is a 1 year kind of make up for lost time, give people the opportunity who missed it, and then it's an 8th grade trip. Yep.
Even if your numbers are low?
Even if the numbers are low, we'd figure out how to make it work. Yep.
Okay. All in favor of approving the school trip to Washington, DC? Aye. Any opposed?
Does-
Have fun.
They may
Okay.
talk to April. and see. Yeah,
Next year.
So we have one last vote this evening. This is for a social media stipend. So you may remember at the end of when we went through the new contract, there was an additional stipend. So, and we have been seeing the fabulous results of that. So, Mr. Wood?
Yes, so this, so I sat down with the HTA president, co-presidents, and talked about a range that I had a conversation with with Kathy and Christy about, and did a formula that I've used in other districts for setting stipends, based on the base salary of the BA column. We came up with 2708. And so they were in agreement to that.
And that is one for each building.
It's one for each building, so it's
It's two
Two
stipends
times-
of
two stipends of
2708.
2708, correct?
And we did include that in the budget. Correct. So it's a budgeted.
It's a budgeted item.
It's a budgeted item.
Right. We know where the money's coming from.
Right. So it's not.
We'd already made our
Unplanned.
budget.
We factored that into as we did
Into the
contract
agreement, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and I believe the job description has some guidelines as to like what's expected in terms
Number
of
of hours. and-
the amount of time and the number of like the frequency of posting and stuff like that. So,
And who is responsible for enforcing that? That'd be
The principals in each building.
I think you guys approve what goes out before it goes out, right?
Yes.
Any questions about social media stipend? We also took a look in terms of like how it looks relative to other stipends that require about the same amount of time, and it's very much on par. A little equity check. Okay, is there a motion to approve?
I'll make
this?
the motion to approve the social media stipend as presented.
A second.
Second.
Awesome. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Social media stipends approved. And with that, phew,
Make a
record
motion
night.
to adjourn.
Excellent. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So adjourned.